Welcome to our Sunday Wisdom session. This quality had me reflecting on it the whole week because it's such a powerful quality. And remember, this is in conjunction with 34 other qualities that we're studying. So we're on quality 16 at the moment. And the quality is Anapeksah. And Anapeksah means, it comes from two Sanskrit words, an, which means not or without, and peksha or apeksha means expectation or want. So it means without want, free from want, free from expectation, free from longing. And the phrasing of these words, and it's helpful to have some Sanskrit background because you can go and you can check the etymology and see like, what's the flavor of the word? How is it possible to be free from want, to not long for anything? And we're talking here about somebody who has reached self-realization or is thinking about self-realization, who is on the path towards seeking, finding, becoming God. And the reason why this person is free from want and why it's a quality that we would like to imbibe is because it means you're full. You lack nothing. You have everything. Now, when you contact the world with that feeling, you come into the world as a master. You come into the world as a contributor, instead of as a beggar, instead of as a victim. It is a state of fulfillment. And we're talking about the ultimate state here. We're talking about the state of enlightenment, the state of self-realization. And if we convey this subject appropriately, all of us should be inspired to achieve it. Because what a feeling. And the beautiful thing about this path is every step you take towards self-realization, you take towards enlightenment, you're that much more fulfilled. The word that we are searching for to describe this state is called paripurna. That's the Sanskrit word. And purna itself means full, complete. But imagine, that's not enough to describe the state of self-realization, because we can say that at times in life, we experience a state of contentment. We experience a time in our lives where everything seems to be going well, life is good. But it adds the prefix pari there, which also means completely. So it's completely complete, fully full, wholly whole. Because the state of self-realization lacks nothing. There is nothing that the world can do or any of our human efforts can do to enhance that state, nor is there anything that can happen in the world to pull us out of that state, fulfilled. And the example that's given in the scriptures, it's like the seeking that a river does versus the ocean. The ocean is complete, full. The river is restless, it's running, just as we are, trying to get to its final destination, the ocean, complete. Now, when you experience fulfillment, you may contact the world, you may decide not to, but either way, it is out of fullness. Then why do we want? Why do we desire? Why do we start craving for things? Now, it's important to note here, for those of you who are relatively new to the subject, who have joined recently, we gave a talk this week to the G20. So some members who attended that talk have joined. And now suddenly I'm talking about self-realization, enlightenment. The topic was leadership. So for those of you coming out of the leadership lecture and now talking about self-realization, it's a big jump. So just to make sure we're all on the same track. What is the self, anyone? Daksha, you have to unmute.
Ourselves. Self means ourselves.
Ourselves. Which part of yourself?
The spirit.
Our intellect.
Our intellect.
The Atman.
Yes, Atman. Yeah.
Is it the spirit?
It's the spirit. Yes. That's the part that we want to highlight in our personality. So if we see this diagram of the personality, a human being is made up of the material component, which is the elements, matter, and there is the spiritual component, which enlivens the material aspect. We call that spiritual component the consciousness, which makes the material component alive. Matter by itself, no life. Consciousness by itself, we don't see it. We don't see the expression of it. But together, we get the expression. Now, the material component is made up of our body, but also the subtler equipments, which is the mind and intellect, where the thoughts reside. The thoughts and feelings, which are irrational, do not have a direction or dimension. It's more the emotional part of us, impulse, desire, feeling is the mind. And when it's rational reason, it's the intellect. But there is one more component, which we don't know. So we have an idea of our body, we have an idea of our mind, and we're getting a better idea of the importance of the intellect in our personality. But here, this individual is identifying with the spiritual component in them, the self, the spirit, the consciousness. That is the part in you, if you know it, if you identify with it, then you're paripurna, you're complete. But if you identify with the body, then you're limited. Then you get affected by the world. If you identify with the mind, you go up and down. If you identify with the intellect, you're incomplete. But when you identify with the spirit, you're all pervading. You're all blissful. You're paripurna, you're complete. Now, the reason why we don't identify with the self or the spirit, simply because we don't know what it is. But it's there. We're constantly functioning with it. We just don't know what it is. It's like there is the ocean. And on the ocean, there are waves coming and going. And we've decided, instead of identifying with the ocean, we've identified with a small part, which is the wave, which has a rising, and it's got the prime of life, and then it's got a fall and a dissolution. So we identify with the wave, but the wave at no point in time is separate from the ocean. Why have we chosen as our identity the limited form of the wave, which goes up and down, which compares with other waves, gets an inferiority complex, gets a superiority complex? Why not identify truthfully, essentially, the component in you that is the ocean water? Then you're complete. You have everything. You're everywhere. So, how does it all start? The origin of desire is this. Your true nature essentially is the spirit, the self. That's who you are. Why? Because it's the only permanent part in your personality. Everything else changes. We give it different names, we give it different forms. But the one part that stays the same is the ocean, the self, the spirit. So that's the real you. If you know this, and those who have realized it, and realization is the right word because you were never separate from it. it's almost as if we forgot. We became ignorant of it. And realizing your real nature gets you back to that state of fulfillment. Now, if you look at this diagram, it shows the origin of desire. How does all the wanting start? Yourself is paripurna. You're fulfilled. So any person who's realized the self, a Lord Buddha, Lord Krishna, a Mahavir, any of these great saints, they are fulfilled. But if you are ignorant of the self, if you do not know your real nature, your original nature is the self, you feel something missing. It creates a void within. You feel a sense of unfulfillment, incompleteness. Why? Because you don't know your real nature. And whenever there is a void, whenever there is something incomplete, something missing, thoughts go out to fill that void. And here, when there is a void felt within because of the ignorance of our original state, our thoughts go where? It goes to the world to try and fill the void that was created by ignorance of our original state. Those thought currents, those thought streams, going to different aspects, going to companionship, going to wealth, going to education, those different thought currents are called desire. So how did desire arise, anyone? Why do we desire?
Why do we desire?
Yes, Dana.
The ignorance of the self, which is the richness within us.
So what is desire trying to do?
Fulfill us.
Fulfill us. It's trying to fill the
The
void.
void.
And how is that void? When I say void, void means like hole, lacuna, something missing. But why do we feel incomplete? Because we're ignorant of our paripurna nature. We're ignorant of the self. The problem is, we go out into the world to try and fill the feeling of unfulfillment. We try to satisfy the feeling of dissatisfaction. We try to complete the incompleteness. What is the problem with desire? What is the problem with this exercise?
It just grows.
It grows.
futile. It never
It's
stops.
almost like that
It never
feeling of
stops.
void. Sorry, go for it.
It's
I said it never
futile.
stops. Sorry. Never stops. It's
It never stops.
futile.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's futile. Mhm.
You don't know what your desire is going to be.
You don't know what your desire is going to be.
It keeps you disconnected from your essence.
It keeps you disconnected from your essence. Yes. Yes, it does. What is the purpose of desire? So we keep this diagram in mind again. What is the purpose of desire?
To fill the void.
To fill the void.
Would it be true to say that actually there is no void? We experience the void, but we were paripurn. So there is, really speaking, no void to fill.
That's what the ignorance creates. So, but we go step by step. So the first part is the desire is there to try and complete that. So we're going into the world with the idea to satisfy that. But from our experience, even from meeting different people in our lives, those who've achieved the acme of success, those who perhaps just won the French Open, South Africa won the World Test Championship, you go and you meet them. And there's some pleasure, no doubt. There's celebration. And then you still feel the void. And we thought that all our effort, all the strain and stress that we experience would be worth it, and that we will feel fulfilled when we get that particular achievement in the world, when we fulfill that particular desire. But it does not, and it cannot, because the void is not a hole that you can fill with things, that you can fill with people, that you can fill with emotions. You can't fill it with any of these things. The void remains. Hence, the most successful person, the wealthiest person, the most beautiful person, the most famous person, the most anything in the world still feels the void. Because the only way to tackle the void is by dealing with the true cause of the void, which is
The ignorance of the self.
Ignorance of the self.
ignorance of the self. How do you combat ignorance of the self?
With knowledge.
Knowledge, which knowledge?
Knowledge of the
physics?
higher.
Knowledge of the higher? Which higher?
The self.
Self, the unknown. So you
Of
have to go
spirit.
from unknown to the unknown.
Knowledge
Knowledge of the spirit.
of the spirit. Knowledge of the self. The whole drama, the whole origin of desire comes from ignorance of our fullness, ignorance of our completeness, ignorance of the self. So if we want to truly satisfy desire, you've got to go back to the cause of desire, which is the ignorance. And the only thing that can combat ignorance is not a beautiful holiday, fine food, delicious drink. It is knowledge of self. Knowledge combats ignorance. This is it. There's a quote from the Vedanta treatise. Probably it will be the modern scripture. Contemporary thought and language. And what's unique about this scripture written by Swami Rama is that it has a structure. It takes you shoulder to shoulder, all the way up, like just wanting to improve life, right up to self-realization, paripurna. And in this book, Swamiji says this: spiritual ignorance is the cause of all sorrow in the world. There is only one way to eradicate sorrow and establish enduring peace and happiness in life. That is to instill the knowledge of the inner self, the knowledge of the absolute reality. Everything else we do is distraction. Everything else we do is temporary. Our only business in life is to find the self. And what are we doing? Everything else besides this. This is the one solution. Now, for a person who experiences this, who's found the self, and there are stories about such great souls, there's a feeling of genuinely anything you offer them, no thank you. It's not an act. They feel, I have everything, but would you like this? Can I get you this? And you ask, can I get something? Look, I'm coming from Brazil. I'm coming from Switzerland. Is there anything that we can get for you? And they genuinely feel, such a person, no, thank you. And sometimes if you insist, no, please, it is for me. I'd really like to do something for this person. And they apply themselves. They think about it. They can't come up with anything. They feel like they lack nothing. Why is that? Because anything that you can present to them, It's like presenting candles, candlelight. So a little bit of light. So you present a candlelight, you present a torchlight when they have the sun. It is, what is the comparison? They're enjoying the sun and you're offering candlelight. No comparison. So the stories go where there was a great devotee of the Lord and is just enjoying, basking in the divinity, in their devotion to the Lord, fulfilled. And the Lord, pleased with the devotee's devotion, comes down and says, "Oh, my dear disciple, my devotee, I will grant you any boon that you want. You name it. Your devotion has been so great. You are one with me. Is there anything that I can do for you?" And the devotee replies, as any great devotee would, "Is there anything that I can ask that you've already not given?" So you've given everything. What can I ask for? And the Lord was insistent. No, come. I've made this long trip. I've come down from heaven. I know it's not an easy transit passing through earth. So if you can please me, if you can accommodate my request, what do you think? So the devotee pauses for a while. He's trying to think, like, what to ask for? What could he possibly want? And then he looks down and he was repairing one of his shirts. He was sewing a button. He was battling a little bit. And he said, "Oh, I know what my boon can be. Can you help me pass the thread through the needle?" What it shows is, it seems so absurd, but what it shows is the helplessness of such a person to think of something that they want. They're complete. And there's another similar story where, again, the Lord comes down to this devotee, and this devotee was suffering from the disease of elephantiasis, where one limb is extremely swollen. And the Lord again persists. "Look, is there any boon that I can give you?" Imagine, it's got a huge swollen leg. The skin is rough, and that's why they've given the name elephantiasis. And he's thinking, the disciple is thinking, what can I possibly ask? And looks down and he sees the leg that has the elephantiasis. And he says, "Oh Lord, you know what you can do for me? Can you shift the elephantiasis from the right leg to the left leg?" So the right leg was getting pretty heavy. Just give it some relief, shift it to the left leg. So content, so fulfilled. Now you and I, if the Lord came down, we have a shopping list ready. In fact, let's take our Amazon cart and empty it out now. We've got so many wants. Why? Because we don't know the self. Socrates, he says, "Every time I pass a shop, I am amazed at the number of things man can do without." So what is the feeling when we pass a shop? When we do online shopping? How do you feel? Do you feel, I could do with this? I want this. I need that. That needing, that longing is apeksha. Anapeksah means not longing, not wanting, because you're full. So I was thinking about how to make this practical, How can we practice this quality? What is a relative, like we're not self-realized. How can we try and imbibe this quality of being free from want? And perhaps we can assert our divinity, our real nature. And it's not being deluded. It is our real nature, but we just don't know it. We don't believe it. We don't understand it completely. And the assertion is this: I am the self, complete, whole, infinite. I lack nothing. I am in everything. And when you assert this way, not in a mechanical, repetitive way, but in a feeling way, in a trying to become that, a trying to feel that, how does it help? It helps us in the way we start approaching life. So imagine if you have this assertion, and now you approach life, your work, your relationships, with this in mind. You start approaching life and the world with fullness. So it's as if you're full and now you're relating to the world. Now, what this does is, to the extent we imbibe it, to the extent we believe it, to the extent we actually become it. We're not just repeating it, we're not just trying, but we're becoming it. What it does is, when you have a desire or a want, you approach it from fullness. I'm already full, and I'm going into this activity. And that renders you an objectivity. The opposite of this is when you go into that particular activity out of being very needy, desperately wanting it, longing for it, craving for it, obsessing about it. Now, when we do that, we're restless, we're agitated. I must get this. Sometimes when you're at the verge of getting that particular activity, I remember in high school, the students trying to, they've done so well in the exam, but I remember in the beginning of the exam, when the papers are being handed out, they know it's the final exam, it's important. I remember some of my colleagues, their hands started shaking. So much anxiety, so much nervousness, hand is shaking right before. Some athletes, some sports people, they cannot sleep before the match, before the final. Cricket captains, they would drive around the whole night until the next morning match. Why? Because they need that activity, they need that result to complete them. And the trouble is, as we've discussed, it's never going to complete you anyway. And you only realize that upon achievement, upon fulfillment of the desire, that it did not fill the void. And yet all that desperation actually hindered your potential achievement. So if we try and assert this fullness and go into a particular action, we become objective. We become content because you're approaching from fullness into the activity. We become powerful because when you approach from fullness, it's not as if anyone is doing you a favor. You're approaching it as you're already full and you're choosing to do this activity. You're choosing to engage with a person. You're choosing to go to work. You're not doing the work for being whole, complete. That's the neediness. And that change in perspective, it's you coming out of fullness instead of you trying to be full. changes you from weak to powerful. And the one more benefit in trying to imbibe this, assert the fullness of your real self, is relationships. No doubt we go into relationships because we need companionship. We need intimacy. We need something from the other person, recreation, entertainment. But imagine, even in our relationships, before we engage with others, we approach it out of fullness. I am complete and I'm relating with you. It will be a different relationship, because instead of it being needy, clingy, being attached, you pull energy from the other person. The other person feels your dependence, feels your neediness. But when you approach it out of fullness, the other person finds you more attractive because you're giving. And all it is just that shift. There's a story of a royal family. And the royal couple, king and queen, they had a young son just born. And during that time, there was a flood. And the flood was so powerful, it swept so much of the kingdom away. And to try and save this baby, they put the baby in a cot, in a basket, hoping that it would survive the flood. The king and queen perished. Many of the kingdom perished. But the cot kept the baby safe. The baby survived. This is the prince, the heir to the kingdom. And those who survived went looking for the young prince, this young baby. And they knew what to look for because the baby had the royal insignia tattooed on the shoulder. So they knew what to look for, but they could not find the baby. And this baby grew up to a young boy, was in poverty, had no parents, naturally, king and queen had died, and grew up living in the streets. And the boy would beg. And he would go to some shopkeepers, and some of the shopkeepers was kind. They would offer the boy something. Some of the shopkeepers were mean. They threw the boy out. You are a pest, get out of here. And some were indifferent, neither good, neither bad. And so the boy lived day to day. So sometimes received, happy, sometimes rejected, miserable, sometimes indifferent, neutral. Until one day, he was caught by the police. And he had done nothing wrong, so he was surprised. But they took him into the van and opened his shirt, they checked. It was the prince. He was confused, naturally. And they took him to the kingdom. And one of the royal administrators who had survived the flood recognized the symbol and said, "This is our heir apparent. This is the king of our state." Oh, what a joyous day that we have found the young prince and now our king. We will inaugurate. And the young boy was confused, and the minister explained what had happened to him. He took a long time to accept it. In fact, many of the first few months, he tried escaping. Suddenly, so much of attention, so many people attending to his every want, every need. But he grew into his kingly status. He understood that he is a king. Sometime later, he crept out one night from the palace and he put on his beggar clothes that he had kept from the time he was caught. And he went out into the streets. And some of the shopkeepers recognized him. And the kind one said, "Oh, you've been away for so long. We wondered what happened to you." And they gave him some money. They fed him nice. And he went to the other shopkeepers who treated him badly. And they were equally bad this time. And they said, "What are you doing here? We thought we got rid of you. Get lost." And again, some were indifferent. Now, the question I ask you, what is the difference between the boy begging then and the boy begging now?
Neediness.
Neediness. When was he king?
Always.
Always been.
He's always the king.
Out of
He was
habit, maybe?
always the king. Sorry?
Out of habit?
Out of habit. The difference between the boy begging then and the boy begging now is not that he was a beggar then and a king now. He was always the king. But back then, he was not aware that he was the king. He did not know his kingly status. And later, when he knew he was the king and he went back and begged, what is the difference? The good treatment, the bad treatment, the indifferent treatment made no difference to him because he knew his real status is the king. Same thing with us. We are the self. The trouble is, we don't know it. So when we go beggars now into the world, trying to eke out pleasure and happiness from perceptions and from emotions and from thoughts, the only change that needs to happen is the knowledge of our kingly status. We are the self, we are fulfilled. Now go out into the same world, doing the same things, but approach it with that recognition. Approach it with that understanding of your fullness and see how the world is different. You might have the same things happening to you, but it doesn't affect you. You're complete. You have better relationships because you're not looking to take, you're coming out of fullness. So everything you engage is an expression of that fullness. And the opposite of this is the wanting, the neediness, the trying to fulfill the incompleteness only makes you weaker. And if you approach desire and you allow that desire to become obsession, neediness, longing, wanting, it will weaken you. It'll weaken your relationships. That person will not want to be with you. Assert your fullness. But to assert the fullness, it has to go hand in hand with gaining knowledge of the self. And that is what Vedanta is. Now, I know there are many of you who are joining us regularly every week for these Sunday wisdom sessions. Excellent. But once a week for an hour is not enough to offset all the other years and years, maybe perhaps lifetimes, of thoughts of different identification. So to regain our true identity, it needs consistent effort. And the suggestion is dedicate half an hour in your day to gaining knowledge of the self. And that is Vedanta. Why? Because it frees you from want. To the extent you gain the knowledge of your real self, to that extent, your wants become fewer and fewer. You feel fulfilled. It doesn't mean you don't engage with the world, you don't interact with the world and people, but there's no neediness. And when you reach self-realization, you complete. What a state. Okay. So that is our quality for the week. And our question for the week, something different. Different theme, at least. How many of you have heard of Swami Rama Tirtha? All right. Yeah. So we've mentioned this Swami in the lecture. He died in 1906. And yet our teacher, our guru, Swami Parthasarathi, says that his guru is Swami Rama Tirtha because his work had such an influence on the Vedanta treatise, on his understanding of Vedanta. And Swami Rama Tirtha, he was a prodigy, had read so much at a young age, was a mathematics professor in North India, and at the age of 32, died, drowned in the Ganges River outside his cave that he was living in the Himalayas. But can you imagine, at 32, 1902, he traveled to the US with no money, got onto a ship and traveled to the US and then to Tokyo, learned Japanese and gave lectures in Japanese, used to speak Urdu and Arabic. Nothing short of genius. He had read everyone and died at 32. His understanding of the world and his connection of reality, Vedanta, to every aspect of the world was phenomenal. And when he was in the US, he naturally gained a lot of attraction. This young, extremely good-looking, a young man, well-spoken, articulate. He ran the Boston Marathon, met the president of the USA at the time. So imagine, came without any money and managed to do so much in the US. And during that time there, different reporters would come up to him and ask him for just his thoughts on different ideas. And he would always provoke them with statements. So he would say, for example, the way to gain anything is to lose it. And this is one of the statements. So like, what a way, like the way to achieve is through detachment. But he would provoke people. So he would give a statement that would shake people up. And one of the questions he was asked, and this is a long introduction for our question for the week. A journalist came up and said, Swami, what do you do for holiday? What do you do on weekends? What do you do to rest? And he replied, intense work is rest. So the question of the week is, explain this quote by Swami Rama Tirtha. Intense work is rest. So if I ask any of you now, when you think of rest, what picture comes to mind?
Doing nothing, it's more relaxing.
Doing nothing, more relaxing. Maybe a beach. Maybe a walk in the park. I'm sure each of you has different. Dip in the lake. Each of you has different variations, ideas of rest. For any of you, does that picture of rest look like being in the office?
So for me, when I'm focused on what I'm doing, my mind, I let go of my thoughts and my desires, and I'm so focused on the task in my hand So I don't know if that's called rest. Rest from the mind, maybe. Rest from my thoughts and the monkey mind.
Dana, it is that. That
It
is
is
what
that?
Swami Rama Tirtha is saying.
Okay.
He's saying that at the moment, our concept of work is tiring, is stressful, is draining. But it's not the work that is the problem, because work is just an activity. It is our relationship with work. It is our mind during work. So this is where we get into. Work at the moment is tiring because of the way we approach it. And the way we dissipate our energy, or the way we tire ourselves, is through these three avenues. One, when we're working, we worry about the past mistakes, things that have happened. The second, we have anxiety for the future. What's going to happen? Now, how are we going to adjust? This is what's going on. And there are these restrictions going on in trade. There are these things happening in different parts of the world. This is affecting my business. And the third one, or the third way we dissipate our energy, is through our ego. We get so caught up in the fact that I am doing that there's very little attention or focus or concentration on the action itself. It's so busy worrying about the fact that I am saying rather than what you're saying. We're more focused on the speaker, you, than the content. And that ego is the friction, is the diluting force in an action. These three things, doership, ego, anxiety for the future, worry of the past, this is what tires us out, not the work. So if you can remove ego, worry, and anxiety from your work, that work can be restful. Just as some of us, for rest, play sport. But the sport is exerting. It's effortful, right? But how is it that we find sport relaxing? No worry of the past, no anxiety for the future, no ego. You're just playing, you're enjoying. But then some people change sport into work. Professional athletes, they turn something that they love into work. When I say work, they turn it into something that tires them out. Why? Not the sport, not the activity, because of ego, anxiety, worry. Now, when Swami Rama Tirtha uses the word intense, what he means is very similar to what you said, Dana, is that the mind is completely focused on the action. So there is no room for the ego. You're in the present. They describe it as being in the flow, being in the zone. An artist, when they are creating the best art, they're absorbed in the piece. They're one with the piece. I watched the documentary on Ayrton Senna, and he talks about this being in the zone, almost of a meditative state where you're one with the activity that you're doing. And that being in the present, when your mind is not anxious of the future, not worried about the past, it is at that time at rest in the present activity. And because there is no doer, you're one with that particular activity or action, there is no ego, no friction. That is rest. Is it possible to make work restful? Yes, but this is how you have to do it. And Swami Rama Tirtha uses the word intense to say complete presence with the activity that you're with. Just being in the present. Cutting off the past, cutting off the future, cutting off the doership. It is me acting and just doing what needs to be done. It is the highest spiritual exercise. It is also the most restful exercise. It's not difficult. It's possible. So Avani and myself have returned to India after 4 months of continuous travel. I think we calculated it was some 20 flights, 11 countries, 16 cities. And people are asking us, how can you do it for so long? How do you not collapse? So even people who fly a lot for corporate, they were amazed at the kind of travel that we're doing. And actually, if you break it down, what is the tiring part? We're in air-conditioned airports. When we're traveling or flying, it's not like we're flapping our arms to get there. We're seated, we're reading a book, watching a movie, having a chat. What is the tiring part in it? The tiring part is not the activity. It's the worry and the anxiety. And no doubt, there are activities that tend to get the mind racing more. And those are the activities we need to improve our intellect to be in the present more. But we have activities where we tend to be more in the present, usually when it's in line with your nature. Usually when it's easier to get absorbed in it. Or we have moments of those. We've got to try and make those moments more a part of our day. So, one thing we can do, if work yet is not restful, if work yet is stressful, tiring, egoful, find an activity where you are in the present. Use that in your day to unwind, become at rest. So there was a businesswoman who was telling me about how she just is so wound up by work and finds it difficult to fall off to sleep because work sets off all these anxieties and worries. And then even when she stops working, she's working. And what we found out is, when is the mind at the present? She does a particular sport, but she does it in the morning. And she says, when she does that sport, she's present, she's at peace. So we said, okay, let's switch the sport to after work. Use that as a time to get the mind back in the present. Sleep improved. Rest improved. Why? Just placement of the activity. So we've got to find activities when we know our mind tends to get, we need to find activities where it's easier to be in the present. All the while, with our knowledge of self, we side by side develop our intellect to be more intensely working because it's restful. Until then, we've got to find the activities where we are in the present, and that will give us rest. Questions, anyone?
Can meditation be that activity?
Yes, it can.
Hmm?
So meditation is the ultimate concentration. So when you are in the present, you are generally with the environment that you're with. So you're taking in the sounds, you're with the activity that you're doing. Now, meditation is the highest version of that, which is you are concentrating not just on your surroundings, you're concentrating on one thought. So it is precision, it's laser-like. And those who do meditation, firstly, we have to be qualified for it in the sense to be able to concentrate at that intensity, not easy. But if you're able to concentrate at that intensity, people who practice it say they don't know how the time goes because they're so absorbed in that one thought. If our mind is not ready for single-pointed concentration, I'm not talking about focusing on breath. We're talking about one thought here. For those who are trying it and finding it difficult, do not force yourself. It is the latter part of the spiritual path. If you're referring, Dana, to how meditation is generally conceived today, which is trying to be more intellectual, just being aware of where you are, how the body is feeling, being present, breathing, that's a general awareness, concentration. Yes, helpful, restful. Ultimate meditation is single-pointed concentration, no other thought. Very difficult. But it's just an
Sudhakarji.
intensity of the same. Yes, Deepak Bhai.
Yeah. Sudhakarji, a set of related questions, if you could just bear with me. Why don't we believe that we are the self? What holds us back? I'm just going in trying to see how one can really make this happen today, because I think today is a very, very important session. It's the heart of it. So I'm trying to bring it into life. So why don't we believe that we are the self?
Because we don't know what it is. But what we do know is this body. When this body is hurt, you feel pain. When this body is ill, you feel down. So because of the immediacy of this body, the mind and its feelings, the intellect and its thoughts, that identification is so much easier. So we have to do two things. We have to remove the constructs that we already have in place where we put our identity wrongfully and shift it to a path that we don't know yet. And that requires knowledge, investigation, examination, and then the shift. So there's quite a bit of effort involved, because it's not just building this new identity on one part of our personality. We don't know that part, and the part that we do know, we have to move that identification from there to the unknown. So there's some work involved, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what exactly is meant by the knowledge of self? You know, we say this and repeat it every time. What is required is a knowledge of the self. Now, when you say knowledge of physics, you can understand. When you say knowledge of chemistry, you can vaguely know, etc., etc. When we say knowledge of the self, what does it really mean? How does one visualize what this knowledge is to be able to get that?
Sure. So it's actually this subject. So it's like what we're doing today. It is the knowledge of the spirit, or that deals with the spiritual component of you. So it's information. But that information by itself is not going to give you or remove the ignorance. That information has to be digested by you, and then it becomes, then it unveils or reveals the self in you. So it needs to be absorbed. So information, like ChatGPT has got so much of information on the self, on the spirit, but it does not mean that it's enlightened. So the same thing with us. We may read all these books, we may hear all these lectures, but we've got to absorb it. It's like a person who's forgotten their memory, and you're telling that person, look, you are an artist. Look, you were born in 1985. Look, you're married. And you're telling the person all these facts, and they're memorizing the facts, but they haven't absorbed it where they're like, yes, I remember. So we've got to take that information and stay with it until we become it. That's when you really know the self, or you really remove the ignorance. Until then, we've got to gather the information about it.
Can I say something?
Yes, Dana.
Me, I've been cultivating this relationship with myself by conversing, talking, asking, even if I'm not listening or receiving, but it helped me a lot to connect to myself.
Questions is an excellent way to delve deeper. into your personality. And one of the questions that spiritual seekers use, and you've got to find the one where you can unravel and go deeper into your personality, is who am I? Who am I? And you unravel that.
And I'm asking also, what is the truth whenever I'm confused?
So this is it. So you got to find, and that's why there are so many qualities given, because we're taking the truth and we're looking at it from different aspects. So you got to find the one that inspires you and go to the bottom of that. So whether you go and use the word truth, or you use the word I, the pronoun I, or you use the word spirit, you go to the bottom of it, you reach the same consciousness. And that's what we're trying to do. We'll take up one more question.
If I can say something. Thank you for the session on meditation. So when I meditate and then I recognize feelings, different feelings, how do I act on that? Do I act on that after the meditation, or I immediately realize it and I address it? How would you say I should address feelings that I encounter during a meditation session? Thank you.
Sure. Bertha, the first thing is to understand what is the purpose of the meditation. So when you're meditating, or let's use the word concentrating, it's like saying, what are you concentrating on? So if you're concentrating on cooking and feelings are coming up during cooking, and now you're asking me, what should I do with those feelings? I say, first finish the meal. Right? That's what you're supposed to be doing. Do that activity properly. Okay. But you can ask yourself, why during this quiet time that I've made available, which you're saying is meditation, why are these emotions coming up? So finish the meditation practice. And when you have some time later, you can reflect, why is it that when I'm quiet, I find these common emotions coming up? It means there is something unresolved. If it happens once or twice, it could just be a fleeting thing. I won't give it too much relevance. But if you find that they are repeatedly coming, there is some unresolved desire that we need to take care of, that we need to apply perspective. That desire is coming up when it's not supposed to, when you don't want it to, when you're doing something else. It's a sign saying, attend to me. So make a note of it, and then we bring in our intellect and say, how can we take care of this? What needs to be done? Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We take up the next quality, purity, next Sunday.
Thank you,
Have a good
Sudhakar.
week.
Hari Om.
Thank
Hari
you.
Om.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare